everyone just uses me as their standard analyst who must have been laughing at Duplessis. But I think that Duplessis fights give people the chance to like shit on a fighter technically when maybe they don't have full understanding of the stuff that makes him impressive. But I've talked about that 100 times, and we'll talk more about that in the context of this matchup. Khamzat Chimaev, why is he so frustrating to try and write and talk about? Well, because he's unbeaten, and some of these fights he's had some real showings of weakness or potential for a weakness that hasn't been exploited yet. It's kind of similar to the Zabit Magomed Sharipov thing, where, yeah, you got to the end of that 3-rounder and you won, but we're all now going, what is he like if you take him into the 4th round? And luckily, Zabit decided that he never wanted to do a 5-round fight and retired. But the cardio is very much an issue. And I've seen people say that like the really bad experience he had during COVID might have been to do with that. But he does fight in a way that is like, you know, how people used to talk about Conor McGregor putting everything into every shot and then you can't fight like that for X number of rounds. It's kind of like how Khamzat Chimaev fights a lot of his fights. I'm going to go straight from my ideas for the Filthy Casuals guide, but I broke the successful takedowns that Chimaev has completed in the UFC and in his pre-UFC career, from what I could find of it, into 3 types. I got the bum rush and duck, the tenacity low shot helped by the fence, and the right cross to head on the left side. So I'll break down what each of those means. The bum rush and duck, this is what made me so angry about Li Jingliang's attempt to fight Chimaev. At that time, almost every fight, you can look at his, something came up earlier this week that was the time it took Chimaev to get his first takedown on all his opponents, and none of them was more than a minute. All his pre-UFC fights, he comes out and he does like a high kick and ducks because the opponent will swing back. Or he goes off the glove touch in one of them, and then he does it against Kevin Holland later on. But Li Jingliang came out and went, well, I'm going to try and knock him out on the first punch. And it's like, if you're going to try and knock him out on the first punch because he's going to drop on your hips, throw something that's going to hit him if he drops on your hips. Li Jingliang comes out, throws a right straight, high, because Khamzat's like 4 inches taller than him too, throws it high, and Khamzat's already on his hips, taking him down. It was the easiest takedown you've ever seen, and he gave it to him for free because he fought really stupid. So the bum rush and duck is his classic opener, but the high kick is a variation of that. Lead with the high kick, duck the return, because when you throw a hard high kick against someone's gloves, they're going to try and get it back almost every single time. They might even throw a high kick back, which is an easy-ass takedown if you level change on that. But he wants you to commit to an exchange with him so that when you're punching, your elbows are open, he's already stepping in or diving in. Then the right cross to head on the left side I really like, because I lined up a load of Fedor footage for this one, and even Brock Lesnar hit one at one point. But the double leg, if you watch college wrestlers, you can lead with a leg or you can stand square. And standing square has its own advantages and disadvantages. Obviously, it's a lot. You're not giving up a leg so easily if you're standing with your feet square, and you can head block and get down low and so on. If you've got 1 foot forward, there's 1 foot out there to attack, but at least you know which one they're attacking most of the time. But because of that, double legs can be hit with your head on the left side, head on the right side, head in the center. You know, Jordan Burroughs' double leg is literally like forehead into your pelvic bone. It's just, and I've seen people try it and stinger themselves, you know, head whip back and hurt themselves. You need some prepared neck strength to be trying that one. Or, you know, even in grappling competitions, Andre Galvao and his protege, Kaynan Duarte, both, they club the head and they pull it down for ages to get guys standing up straight, and then they just duck and headbutt in the middle of the chest and get their hands behind the knees. Easiest high double of all time, and it works every time. But there's a lot of variations of the double leg. You know, Burroughs goes real low on the floor and shoots straight through people, basically. And he can, like, run on his knees, which is incredible. But in MMA, the tendency is towards, if you're orthodox and the opponent's orthodox, you either jab or you duck their punch with your head on your right, on their left side of their body. So their lead leg, you put your head outside that, and then you try and double leg them. You know, GSP's kind of a special case because he didn't wrestle as an amateur at any point, but his double leg is always head outside the lead leg, and then he does a bit of chest press. He's got a weird double leg where he tries to chest pressure them like he's running the pipe on a single, and then as they hop round, he picks up both legs and flares them to the other direction. Very cool stuff. If you watch his fight with Thiago Alves, he does that 4 or 5 times. He starts pressuring him around, so he's hopping on one leg, and then he scoops up the other one and runs the other way. Mendes did that a lot too. You know, he was known for his double leg in wrestling, and they called him the money shot, and then that became Money Mendes. But he hit a lot of his doubles, ducking under things with his head on the outside of the lead leg, which is, I think, it's also partly because that leg's out there, sort of dictating it, but it's also because the inside slipping to the outside of the jab is a very natural movement. Everyone learns to do that. We were talking about this with Roman Dolidze throwing that jab and dipping with his chin way up in the air earlier this week. It's a very natural movement. That's how you defend punches. You dip into your stance. You don't dip to the other side of your stance. What I like about the right hand that puts your head on your left of their body, the right side of their body, is that you can hit the double going that way and cut across them. You can come into a clinch. You can throw the right hand and smash in chest to chest and dig the underhook with the same hand you've just thrown. It's a really cool move, and what I really love about it is that it teaches 2 things. It teaches grapplers how to hit because they're transferring their weight onto their lead leg to throw the right hand, and it gets them a bit braver doing that. And the second thing is that it teaches them to get close enough to actually be able to grab a hold of the guy. Because if you watch something like Roger Gracie's fight with, was it King Mo? Or there's been a lot of grapplers who try and jab and shoot because it's very easy to, drill, jab, shoot, jab, shoot. And if your jab's not convincing, the other guy's not going to throw back. And he's right on the end of your range when you throw your jab to begin with. So there's a lot of time for him to react if you shoot. And he's not really come out of his shell. If you throw your right hand and you fall into him, his hands have to come up. You're probably going to fall into at least a clinch with some underhooks, or you could just run straight through him. But he has to respect it. And that means later in the fight, when you start throwing jabs and things, he's going to throw back, and that might give you the chance to use a jab and dip that's actually successful. So the right hand into the shot with the head on the other side, or the punch and clutch, love that. And that's his other one, Chimaev. And when I was doing a Filthy Casuals guide, I was going to talk here about the Joe Louis style cross, because that is Chimaev's one punch, really. He jabs a bit, but step onto the lead foot, throw the head forward over the left knee, throw the right hand across the top, elbow up. There's a guy on YouTube called Frank's Fistic Science or Frank's Pugilism or something like that. He's a Scottish lightweight who had 100 amateur fights or something like that. He's got to be 70 now. But he talks about the cross, and he was taught it as not a straight punch, you move your head from over one knee to the other, and you let the elbow come out and you throw it in like a little arc, and it's short, but it's sort of hooking, but it's sort of going straight too. So it's interesting because I'm always talking about the cross counter. The cross is like that if it's not going over the opponent's jab, but it's a great way of learning how to hit really, really hard. If you watch all of Joe Louis's best knockouts, it's him throwing his head over his lead leg, his right elbow comes up, and his right hand goes across the top. Now, the downside of that is if you throw it and you're not close enough, it's very hard to follow up and you can get hit. So I had a couple of clips of Fedor doing the big right hand into takedown 4 times on Nogueira. And then later in the fight, he's throwing the big right hand, stepping really long in his stance, missing, falling short. And then Nogueira will jab him a couple of times while he's out of position. Ultimately, didn't matter because no one noticed because Nogueira had famously pillow fists. But if you ever wonder why Chimaev doesn't really combination punch much, it's because even when he wants to stay on the feet, he throws his right hand like this and he sort of lunges forward onto his lead leg and he has trouble getting back off it. And then if you watch Joe Louis do it, his right foot always comes up with him. He stretches his stance and then his right foot comes up behind him. So he's nice and close, and then he's got the left hook following up. But yeah, Chimaev's striking is very interesting because he's had success with it, which made everyone go, oh my God, even his B game, he's knocking people out with the first punch and stuff. But he is very one note. And if you watch the fight with Usman, he just sort of runs out of ideas very quickly and then sort of just stands there staring at Usman. I think maybe he tired himself out in the first round too, but the Gilbert Burns fight, he throws this right cross or whatever you want to call it, and he keeps getting clipped with the left hook on the counter, but his head's offline, so he's a little bit safer, but he's still getting stunned by it, by Gilbert Burns. I think a lot of the time his size insulates him because he can jab people from a mile away. But Usman was getting off jabs and right straights for free in that fight, basically unanswered. Sorry, so that's 2 types of takedowns: bum rush and duck, and then the right cross to head on the left, to head on the other side. And then the third type of takedown I classified as the tenacity low shot, helped by fence. Because the interesting thing about Chimaev's two best opponents, actually a bit against Burns as well, is that his setups didn't really work. Maybe against Whittaker, he didn't really need to do it much. But the thing is that where a lot of fighters coming up, their physicality will allow them to blow through like the lower level of opponent. And then as they get better, they have to sort of like be a bit more technical as well as a physical beast. Khamzat's last two fights where he fought his best opponents, he kind of relied more on his physicality than I've ever seen before, because against Whittaker and against Usman, he shoots these long diving shots onto his knees and then bear crawls up towards the fence trying to come up on a single or on into a clinch or whatever. And there's, like Robert Whittaker said, and he shoots in a millimeter off the floor. How am I supposed to defend that? But like, obviously, if you fall short on those shots, that's not good. In the third round against Usman, he's shooting those and just coming nowhere close, and he can't run up into the fence because it takes a ton of effort. It's a very physically demanding takedown to shoot low and just work your way up to something better. It's also massively aided by ring position, because obviously the closer you are to the fence, the more likely you're able to crawl up and smush them to the fence before they can get away. So in that third round against Usman, he's shooting from a mile out. So always with Khamzat Chimaev, there's this like, what about when it gets to the later rounds? What if he gets into round 4? Because those kind of shots, they're just not going to hold up through the fight. And of course, the physicality aspect of it, he was out muscling Whittaker and Usman. Obviously, Usman welterweight coming up. Whittaker was at one time a welterweight, and of course, Du Plessis was also at one time a welterweight. But Du Plessis has looked so physical at this weight class, and he's put on so much muscle. Insert your drug allegations here against both men, because it's not even really testing anymore. But I will say, if Khamzat's on the EPO, he needs his money back, because it's not been fighting like he's on the EPO. So then there's the top game, and a lot of what Khamzat Chimaev has been doing to good guys is beating them up as they come up on the fence. The cage wrestling stuff, I've been talking about this forever. If you've heard me talk about this before, I'm like, it might be worth going to your back away from the cage. And I've seen that in some lower level fights. People don't tend to do it against the scariest opponents in the world, because you tend to think like, better go to what's the standard against the scariest guy in the world. But the problem with the fence wrestling stuff is